this is a very significant drive. It's the last drive potentially I'll be doing in this Audi A2, and I know there's been some interest in this Audi A2, and so I thought, given that this is perhaps my last opportunity to do so, I will give you a bit of a rundown on my experiences with this Audi, what it's like to own an Audi A2, how it's performed over the last few years, and maybe that will benefit you in one way or another. So where to start? I guess it would be good to start with, well, what is probably an apparent issue, and that's the noise in the cabin right now. I'm driving at speed down a highway, going about 100 kilometers an hour, and it's quite noisy in here, and that's been an issue for some time. Well, I guess it's an issue for all Audi A2 owners who get on the highway. So it's a noisy little car when you're on the highway. It drives all right. It's, you know, it holds the road quite well, unless there's a big gust of wind, and then you tend to get, let's say, swept a bit. I don't know if that's being a bit too harsh, but it's true. You can really feel the wind, you can feel the vibrations. It's noisy. It can be a bit tiring driving this car, particularly on long drives, but that's partly because of what's good about this car, and that's it's so light. It's very cheap to run, and I guess there's a price for that, and that price is the lack of comfort on long rides. So let's talk more about the positives, I suppose, and try and link that to what I've been talking about. So the car is made largely, maybe not largely, I don't know, but there's a lot of aluminium in it, basically. It has what's known as a space frame, and I think that's largely an aluminium frame. The panels, largely aluminium, and of course all this contributes to weight saving, hence the fuel efficiency, hence the vibrations and the noisiness at speed, and the volatility when it comes to large gusts of wind. But that was quite revolutionary, I suppose, or at least so I'm told, or so I've read. Back in the day, this car was made in 2004, this particular model. I think Audi started manufacturing the A2 in 1999, and it was only in production for about 5 or 6 years. I think it was discontinued in 2005. That was largely due to the costs. It's quite expensive to manufacture an aluminium car, and as a result, Audi's margins were quite small. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think they actually sold the A2s at a loss in the United Kingdom, at least, where this car is from. So in some respects, I think the Audi A2 was ahead of its time. It was one of the most fuel efficient cars in its day, and it did have, and I suppose it still does have, a high build quality. This particular model is starting to show its age. We have, you know, you probably can't see that, no you can't, but that's the cup holder, which is broken. The other cup holder also broken. I filled up the tank last week for what may be the last time, and I couldn't open it with the usual method of pushing the button and the fuel cap coming off, or the cap cover, or whatever you want to call it, opening up and then being able to access the fuel cap. So that could potentially be a problem for anyone wishing to put fuel in their car. I don't know if that's a common problem, but it happened on this one. And it seems to be a bit of a general thing. The buttons are going, the plastic buttons. If they're not broken, most of them still work, but the ones which aren't broken are starting to show signs of age. Look, I'm looking around. It's not too bad. This car has done 115,509 miles now. It's still going. It's going really well, I suppose. And just for those who aren't familiar with miles, that's probably around 180 something thousand kilometers, thereabouts. And there's very few exacts in this little film. I'm not reading off a script. I don't have any facts written down at hand, so please accept that I'm going to be prone to making some errors here, but I'll give you the best rundown I can. Yeah, I'll tell you about some issues I've had with the car. I guess one which really stands out was the time it caught on fire. It only caught on fire once, but that was a significant event, and it did happen at a petrol station. I'm coming up to some traffic here, and to be fair, the car did catch on fire after it had been driven from the Netherlands to Poland. I think it might have even been further, I can't remember. It definitely went through the Netherlands and Germany, obviously, and through a large chunk of Poland before it caught on fire. It caught on fire outside of Krakow, about 100 kilometers from Krakow, 100 kilometers west of Krakow, I would say. And it was a bit scary, but like I said, it only caught on fire once, and that happened after a very long drive in which the little car had been floored across the autobahn and just couldn't handle it. So that's a lesson for any A2 owners and drivers. Don't hold your foot down for too long. I think I was doing consistently for, I couldn't say exactly how long, but I think fairly consistently over the course of the entire trip across Germany, about 100 miles an hour. So that's pushing the A2 to the limit. So that's where the limit is on this one. This is a 1.4 litre petrol, and I know you can get them in a range of options. I think the one with the best performance would probably be the 1.6 litre petrol, and maybe you can push that a bit harder, but this one certainly didn't like being driven at high speeds for too long. So there's that aspect. What else happened with the car? When I first bought it, I bought it in Luton and paid £960 for it in 2017, probably around July, August 2017. And it was not a car I ever wanted to buy. I didn't even know about this car before I bought it, actually. So this Audi, for me, was really a product of fate. And what a fantastic car it's been, really. So as I said, we bought it in Luton for £960, if I'm not mistaken, and it was quite an awful thing to gaze my eyes upon when I first saw it. It was definitely not love at first sight, but it's something that has really grown on me over time. And now, as I drive it down this giant bridge for perhaps the last time, if all goes well, it's quite emotional to let her go. We've done a lot in this car. It was the car which we drove our baby home from hospital in. It's taken us on many adventures across Europe and has generally been a really reliable, practical, economical and enjoyable car. And if you find one in good condition, I can highly recommend it. Some of the features I really like about this car is the fact that you can remove the back seats. You can put them down and you can get quite a lot of stuff in it, but you can actually, with a few clips, provided they're working. These ones don't work anymore, actually. That's probably a point worth mentioning. One of them, I think the handle that allows you to unlock it doesn't really work anymore. And you can't put it into you can't get it out of the locked seating position, so you can't really do much with it. But still, when it did work, it was fantastic. And if you do get one of these, just check to see if those mechanisms work. I'm sure we could have got it fixed if we really wanted to, but we didn't. Anyway, that's a great feature and really impressive, I thought, the way that was designed. And just the amount of space this little car has in general was really incredible. I think another thing to talk about is just how fuel efficient it is. It's incredibly fuel efficient. I don't know how I'm going to do the figures here because I haven't really gauged the mileage, but I can tell you that a full tank of fuel, which is, don't even know exactly how many litres it is, but I think it's about 35 litres. Costs about 50-60 euros, and then we get about 400 miles a tank. So what would 400 miles be in kilometers? That'd be more than 600 kilometers. It would be maybe close to 700 kilometers out of a tank. I don't know, don't quote me on those figures, but you know, a full tank, about 400 miles. Quote me on that, not the conversion figures. Now, I think another point to mention is that it still drives incredibly well for a car. This is the 2004 model, which I think I mentioned, so it's coming on to about 17 years now, and it drives really well for a car of its age. I actually I haven't driven too many 17-year-old cars, but look, this drives pretty well, let's just say that. It doesn't feel, loose in the steering. It feels quite tight. Everything, it shifts nicely, nice and clean. The clutch is really feeling strong still. I've done some work on it. I can't remember. I've done quite a lot of work on it because when I bought it, it wasn't in the best condition, so it did require quite a bit to get up to scratch. And over the years, to be honest, I've spent far more on it than what I paid for it. But I'm sure if you looked around and you were focused, you could probably do a bit better than what I did. I know I got this for what sounds like a really reasonable price, £960, but when I bought that, it needed new tyres straight away. It had a cracked windscreen, so that had to be replaced. What else? There's just so many things which I've done. Just little things like this visor that had to be replaced. Well, it wasn't there. It was missing. I wonder what else I should tell you about it. What would I want to know about this car? I would just say, look, it's a great car. I think it's become really collectible now for some people, at least, as is the way with collectible things by and large. And that would come down to a number of factors. I think we talked about how innovative it was back in the day. It was, for a small car, I think it had a lot of technology poured into it, and that aluminium space frame and the whole design were key factors which really helped to make this such an iconic car. I know it didn't do well back in the day, but I think over time this will perhaps receive the acknowledgement it may really deserve. It does get it now, from me at least. Yeah. So I think it's been a really fantastic car, and it is sad to let it go, but the time I think is right. And the reasons, I think talking about the reasons why we're letting it go would be good. I won't talk about all the reasons, but I'll just mention some key ones, which pertain largely to the car specifically. One is the size. Now that we have a baby, and this is fine for people with a baby, I think, but so maybe that's not right. So let's just say we want more space so we can do more things, we can carry more things, and that's why we're going for a station wagon or an estate car, whatever you want to call it. So that's a key factor, but the other key factor is that it isn't great on the highway, as I mentioned. So we're going for a car which can really do some miles, and we can go touring in and we have a bit more enthusiasm to get in the car, because this thing is a bit exhausting to drive long distances. It's fantastic in the city. It's just a great city car, and part of me really wants to keep it as a city car, and then I would have two cars, one for distances and one for the city, but that would be probably a bit costly. Actually, it might work out. It might actually work out cheaper if you really crunch the numbers, going back to the fuel saving costs on this thing. Okay, well, fantastic car, fantastic city car. Not great for long distances, but it can do them, and it can do them cheaply. I think the brief, and so I've heard the brief for those that were designing and building this car was to build a car which could go from, was it Stuttgart to Milan on one tank of fuel with 4 passengers. I don't even know if that sounds right, but could probably still do that. Maybe it's Stuttgart and Milan and back. Anyway, Stuttgart, Milan, Stuttgart. I don't know. Maybe I'll just edit that section out. So let's hope that all worked out. Cool.